For the Record, the city of Madison uncounts 23 absentee ballots from the spring election after they arrived late.
So why count those ballots if they were 30 minutes past that deadline?
Sure, yeah, they were in our custody.
Why the ballots were late.
Some lack of communication within our office.
And the debate around the state law that sets the deadline.
Is this something that you think there needs to be an update at the state level?
We sit down with Madison's clerk. Then later, for the first time in 40 years, UW-Madison is launching a new college for computing and artificial intelligence.
I think one thing, we're 100% thinking about here is where can we play a role and help shape the public discourse around this.
We sit down with the founding dean to see how coursework can address controversy.
With any powerful technology, there's good use and there's bad use.
That's all coming up on For the Record.
Tough questions, real answers. Wisconsin's political conversations start here. This is For the Record.
Welcome to For the Record. I'm Elila Liberté. The city of Madison has uncounted 23 late-arriving absentee ballots from the April spring election. Last Friday, the Wisconsin Elections Commission voted to overrule the city and county canvassers' decision to count those ballots. Now, a statutory provision says if ballots are not delivered to their polling place by 8 p.m. on Election Day, they may not be counted. This is the second investigation against the Madison Clerk's Office in recent years. Nearly 200 absentee ballots went uncounted during the November 2024 election. So what happened on Election Day? Well, according to the Madison Clerk, the ballots were in the city's possession on April 7th. At 7:30 on that night, Clerk Lydia McComas found out the ballots were not going to make it to the polling place by 8 p.m. She then reached out to the city attorney and was instructed to mark the ballots as arriving late so they could be identified later. The day after, the city reached out to the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Clerk McComas says the WEC said it was up to the city and county board of canvassers' discretion whether to count those ballots. The commission can advise clerks' offices, but ultimately clerks make their own decisions. On April 30th, the WEC ordered the city to reject the ballots. Now, to understand why these ballots arrived late in the first place, I sat down with Clerk McComas. Those ballots were in the possession of the city. What time did they leave to go to the polling site to be counted?
Sure, they left. Those ones that were delayed left at 6:30.
Why did they leave so late in the day?
Yeah, so they should have left earlier, but there was a batch of ballots, a bundle of ballots that was not sent out with the 4 o'clock batch. So we send out mail ballots that arrive on Election Day with the Monday ballots together, and those did not get sent out together. And it was there's some miscommunication within the office around which ballots had been sent out, but those 23 ballots were sent out at 6:30. And a couple of the couriers were given too many routes to too many polling places to deliver to, and that's why they were delayed.
Is this an issue that the city's run into before with delivery times getting messed up or there being issues with routes?
Yeah, it's not uncommon to have issues with routes. This hasn't happened from my understanding, this hasn't happened before. This is only my second election with the city of Madison. It's not uncommon to have late deliveries to polling places of absentee ballots. What's uncommon is the delay of couriers and having them delivered after 8 p.m. and then some lack of communication within our office around the couriers and how many routes or how many polling places they had on their route.
And as you mentioned earlier, too, the Wisconsin Elections Commission voted to have the city revise its final tally to not count those 23 ballots.
Correct.
Should those 23 voters have had their vote counted?
I believe so. They duly cast their ballots. There was nothing wrong with what the voters did. They properly submitted them to my office, and it was my office's mistake that their ballot was not counted. If we didn't have a courier delay, they would have been counted. We also looked at what the Wisconsin Election Commission said about the 2024 193 ballots that weren't counted, and based on that judgment as well, that's why we counted those 23 ballots in April. But it's ultimately up to the Wisconsin Election Commission whether or not those ballots get counted.
Now, state law says that ballots have to be in by 8 p.m. to be cast on Election Day. 15 of these ballots didn't get to the polling site until 8:30 that day. So why count those ballots if they were 30 minutes past that deadline?
Sure, yeah, they were in our custody. They were in the clerk's office custody prior to then. On election night, I didn't know what time those ballots were going to be delivered, and so I didn't have a cutoff time for chief inspectors to mark those ballots or count them. But all of those voters did what they needed to do to get their ballots into our office. And so based on the guidance I got from the city attorney's office, we had those ballots counted.
And based on that guidance, if these ballots had gotten in maybe, let's say, 2 hours late, would they still have been counted?
Yes. However, that would have been very unlikely.
Did you ever question that direction, if that could bring up other concerns down the road?
Yeah, it was a pretty quick decision. But I think it was the right decision in the moment. I think it's important that those votes got cast, and then we could make the decision later whether they needed to be rejected.
I want to ask too a little bit about what the clerk's office should have done to avoid this error. You mentioned you're making changes already. I'd also like to know what those are.
Sure, yeah. So changes both in terms of logistics and personnel. So on the logistics side, we have updated our documentation around courier routes, how many routes how many polling places each route gets. On the personnel front, just on Friday, we posted an absentee lead position. That's part of a larger clerk's office restructure that I implemented once I started here in September of last year. But that position will oversee the operations of absentee balloting. And will be in position before the August election. So I'm really excited about that. The other sort of personnel-related items are we've hired 2 deputy clerks who've started, so we're adding more leadership in the office. One of those deputy clerks directly oversees absentee voting. Those were not in place for April, but are in place this spring and will be in place before the August election.
Have you informed these voters?
Yes, so on Friday, we got the order late in the day on Thursday. On Friday, I sent a letter to all of the voters expressing my sincere apology that their votes were not counted. I want to make sure folks understand that I'm taking this seriously and that it's not okay that their votes weren't counted and what we're doing going forward.
I want to talk a little bit about moving forward to November. We have a big midterms elections coming up here as well. Should Madison move to essential count instead of to avoid having to drive absentee ballots to individual precincts? Is that a conversation being had?
So it's something we've discussed. It is a very different process than what we do currently in Madison. I'm from Minnesota, where we did central count in Hennepin County, and so I'm used to that setup. The amount of equipment, the different types of equipment, and the staffing needed for central count is much different than what we currently do. So we wouldn't be able to implement that this year, but it's something that we would discuss.
Is this something that you think there needs to be an update at the state level to prevent an error like this?
Yeah, I think that there's some confusion about what we are allowed to do after 8 p.m. on Election Day, given the directive that we got from the Wisconsin Election Commission after the 2024 193 ballots. So I think there does need to be some clarification around ballots that are in the clerk's custody before 8 p.m. That are properly cast by voters.
That's all I have for you. I appreciate your time.
Wonderful. Thank you.
That was a condensed and edited version of my interview with the clerk. The full unedited conversation is up on channel3000.com. Now, I also reached out to the city attorney's office to understand the legal argument behind the direction to count the late ballots. The city attorney told me the voters had returned the ballots in time to be counted. The WEC had advised that the city should exercise its discretion, and the WEC had previously said ballots found after an election should have been counted, despite the fact that the WEC presumed they had not been delivered to the polls. Dane County has already appealed the WEC's decision. To Sun Prairie now, where there's an effort to cut the number of polling sites in half. This ordinance, introduced at the Common Council meeting this week, aims to reduce the number of locations from 8 to 4. The city's current polling structure was implemented in 2019, but according to a staff report, election practices and voter behavior in the city have changed since then. Sun Prairie's clerk says roughly 40% of voters in the city cast their ballots absentee, reducing the volume of voters at polling places on Election Day. Implementing electronic poll books has also contributed to shorter wait times. The clerk's office says reducing polling sites would streamline operations. The clerk, writing in a statement, quote, The goal remains the same, to ensure every eligible voter can cast a ballot and have that ballot counted in a system that's accessible, efficient, and reliable. The city says the reduction would save roughly $4,000 to $5,000 per election in staffing. It also estimates it would save roughly $3,700 in annual operational equipment and programming costs. The council is set to vote on the proposal on May 19th. The owner of Minocqua Brewing Company is announcing a run for governor in Wisconsin. Kirk Bangstad made the announcement last Saturday. Bangstad's campaign announcement comes amid controversy surrounding the brewing company's offer to give out free beer the day President Donald Trump dies. The company posted an official statement following the shooting incident at the White House Correspondents' Dinner saying, quote, "Well, we almost got a free beer day." Bangstad had encounters with both the U.S. Secret Service and the FBI following the statements. He claims that after asking multiple other local progressives to run for governor, he decided to run himself.
I'm sick and tired of the corporate Democratic Party and naive Democrats listening to consultants and listening to polls that tell them what we care about as Wisconsinites. You got one guy who's going to rubber stamp a dictatorship, and that's Tom Tiffany. And by the way, you can call him R. Minocqua. You can call me D. Minocqua.
A previous News 3 Now investigation into the company's Madison tap room uncovered that the brewery's political super PAC used donations to pay brewery employees. That's despite employees telling us they did not work for the PAC. Bangstad has declined to do an interview with us over that story. And next on For the Record, for the first time in 40 years, UW-Madison is launching a new college. We sit down with the founding dean of the College of Computing and Artificial Intelligence after this. Thanks for staying with us. For the first time in 40 years, UW-Madison is launching a new college. UW named Remzi Arpachi-Dussault as founding dean of the College of Computing and Artificial Intelligence as the school prepares to launch the new college on July 1st. But as artificial intelligence grows, so does its criticisms. We sat down with the new dean to see what role education has in the booming tech.
Thanks for having me.
What should the role of education be with artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's a big question, and one we've been thinking about a lot. I think the broader educational question, which we hope to play a role in, but I think the whole campus is engaging in, is a question of where are the tools helpful? And so I think that's some of the challenge that we're going to be facing in this time of getting students to understand where the modern tooling can be helpful, understand where not to use it, and then where in our whole educational system are we teaching everybody who comes to this campus some fundamental important things that they'll take with them so that when they use the tools out in the real world, they're doing it in a way that really amplifies them instead of just kind of, using it in a way that's maybe less careful.
And I want to talk about a little bit of the challenges of artificial intelligence too, because it's not without its controversies. You can create inappropriate materials, scams with AI. How are you teaching those guardrails as well as looking to expand that technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the way to think about that is, we're creating a college around computing and artificial intelligence and all our sub-disciplines, not because we're like the big fans of that technology. Of course, we understand the potential positives, but we're also being clear-eyed about this, that with any powerful technology, there's good use and there's bad use. And so as an educational institution, we have to have the whole purview of that. We're not like the technology industry, which is constantly telling you how great everything is. Rather, we're going to be people who are trying to shape technology and make sure that it's landing in the way on society to the extent that we can, where individuals benefit from it, where society benefits from it.
Do you think there should be limits on artificial intelligence?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the short answer is it's very dangerous just to say, here's some technology, I hope it lands well in society, right? That's like very naive. Like clearly no technology is going to do very well in that space. So the way I guess if I were simply answering your question, I would say, yeah, we have to be careful about guardrails and thoughtfully thinking about when is this okay to allow these types of tools into these technological tools into society. I think one thing, we're 100% thinking about here is where can we play a role and help shape the public discourse around this so that when we come to that, trying to understand these technologies, that we're educated, that we understand how they work, that we, of course, while we're helping to build new technologies, we also understand there's people in this building that will criticize and help shape how we should think about them. And then who else do we work with, whether it's state government, federal government, policymakers, to make sure that when we're thinking about these technologies that the regulations around them and the laws around them land us in such a way that they end up being the positives that we hope they can be.
And we've talked very broadly about artificial intelligence, but I want to narrow it back into this college too and talk a little bit about how some of those overarching themes are going to be seen in coursework and majors and things like that. Yeah. I know there may be things that are still being ironed out, but what can students expect for coursework from majors, from classes?
Right now we have computer science, we have data science, we have information science, we have statistics. Those are our 4 undergraduate majors. You can imagine there's going to be very naturally an AI path, and maybe many other pathways too. There will also be, on this campus we don't have minors, but they're called certificates, so you can think of it as a minor. That's something we'll do in concert with many other departments across campus. I imagine we'll be doing something very similar around AI in that space, where we teach a few foundational courses, and then let's say you're a person in a biology department that you'll say, oh, here's a bio-flavored AI course where we'll work on that together, or they'll offer, so their students will start to get not only the core understanding of what's going on in this world, but how to apply it into the domain that they're interested in. And I think generally what we're trying to do is build a deep pathway so that people who want to go into the world of computing, of data, of artificial intelligence, that this is the best place to come. So we've always been really strong in that space, and we're going to want to make it even better in the new college.
Well, that's all we have for you this morning. I appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
That was a condensed version of our interview. You can find the full conversation up now on channel3000.com. And next on For the Record, who has the authority to regulate prediction markets? Wisconsin's Attorney General says it should be the states. We break down where a federal lawsuit could head after this.
Welcome back to For the Record.
The Wisconsin Department of Justice and a bipartisan coalition say they will get final approval in a $700 million Google settlement over App Store monopoly allegations. The lawsuit challenged Google's control over Android app distribution and in-app payments. Most of the settlement funds will go directly to people who made purchases on Google Play from August 2016 to September of 2023. Most recipients won't need to fill out a claim form and will receive their payments through PayPal or Venmo. And the Attorney General's fight over regulating prediction markets could be far from over. Wisconsin's Attorney General is suing companies like Kalshi and Polymarket, alleging they have been facilitating illegal sports betting in Wisconsin by disguising it as event contracts. However, the federal government is pushing back on that claim and on April 29th sued Wisconsin. This week, I asked the Attorney General where he sees the lawsuit heading. Thanks for joining us this morning. I want to get started by asking what you make of the federal argument in this case that these event contracts traded on these prediction markets fall exclusively under the Commodity Futures Trading Commission's jurisdiction.
This is a massive power grab from the federal government. We have a federal agency here that's claiming that through legislation passed over 10 years ago, Congress, without really anybody knowing, took this broad authority to take away power from states to regulate gambling. I think it's really notable that there's a bipartisan group of AGs who have opposed what the federal government is doing here.
And I want to get your response to something the chairman of the CFTC said. He said, quote, states cannot circumvent the clear directive of Congress. Our message to Wisconsin is the same as to New York, Arizona, and others. If you interfere with the operation of federal law and regulating financial markets, we will sue you, end quote. What's your response to that?
Well, we look forward to having this case litigated in court. It's our position that what the CFTC is doing here is going way beyond what it has the authority to do. And essentially, it's taken the same position that companies like Kalshi are, which is that by renaming what it's doing, they can take what is essentially, for all intents and purposes, gambling, as we've alleged, and make that into something that's legal.
The federal lawsuit is largely a question of authority. Could you see this going to the Supreme Court?
I think there's a very good chance that this will end up in front of the Supreme Court, at least with regard to the authority question, whether the federal government has this authority or not. There's one case that was decided by one court of appeals not long ago. There's a case pending in a different court of appeals. And so while it may not be our specific case that goes there, I do think that there will be ultimately Supreme Court review of this issue. And that'll provide guidance and clarity going forward. And it'll be good to get that because then we will no longer be in this position where there's this ongoing dispute about what the law is, but instead we can get back to focusing on ensuring that consumers are protected here in Wisconsin and in states across the country.
That's all I have for you this morning. I appreciate your time.
All right, thanks so much.
For the Record, we'll be right back after this. And before you go, this past Wednesday, the Center for Black Excellence and Culture opened in Madison. The space is meant to be what organizers call a cultural canvas, designed to proliferate Black identity and Black culture. The center is launching adult and youth leadership programs, senior programs, and a children's literacy program. However, founder Reverend Alex G. says the community will be able to decide what they want out of the space.
We want the Black community to walk in and be inspired and see the beauty and see themselves on the walls and in the floor and in the lighting and say, you know what we ought to create, you know what we ought to write, you know what we ought to pull together, you know who should come here. To me, that's the sweetest program, that we've created space where people want to program together, that you don't have to be on my staff to bring programming here.
The center itself is filled with celebrations of Black culture, from the paintings on the walls to the masks hung up. It can also be used as an event hosting space. To learn more, you can go to blackcenter.org. And that does it for us this week. A reminder, you can watch full episodes of the show as well as expanded, unedited interviews on our website at channel3000.com. Have a great rest of your weekend. For the Record, I'm Ellie La Liberté.
This has been For the Record.